Okay, check.
Check.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the program hosts and their guests and are not necessarily those of WSTU, St. Mary's Episcopal Church, and Temple Beit Chaim. Products that may be mentioned are not necessarily intended as an endorsement. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited. And now, WSTU presents A Priest and a Rabbi. Call in with questions and comments at 220-9788. 220-WSTU. Now, here's your host.
Hey, everybody. It is Father Christian, and to my right is Rabbi Matthew Durbin. And two of us are just here on this bright, shining Friday morning. Maybe not. Maybe we pre-recorded it. Maybe we didn't. You'll find out when you call in at 772-220-9788. Nevertheless, though, we have some recent developments here, which are super exciting. Is that we are now officially a podcast, and so that is awesome. So you can find us, A Priest and a Rabbi, on a variety of different platforms, mainly iTunes and Apple Podcasts, which I didn't realize are two different things. Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, Spotify. What else, Mickey Mike?
Yeah. I think you named them all.
Yeah. So that's exciting stuff, don't you think so, Rabbi?
I think what people need to do is to download the app. Download it.
Which app?
Any.
We just give you 7 selections.
Go onto iTunes. Go onto podcast and just search A Priest and a Rabbi, and you'll see our beautiful and just awesome logo of Father Anderson and myself. Download it, costs you nothing, but it's a way that we can really get the word out.
Yes, because as you know, with anything right now in the digital sphere, it gets more exposure the more that it's been visited and the more that it's been ranked. So if you could go on iTunes or any of these other places, but iTunes is hell.
I'm just as you know, because we do maintain our statistics and kind of looking, and I'm quite blown away that beyond North America, we have listeners in California, in Michigan, Florida, New York, Ohio, listeners in Ontario, but I'm super impressed that we have a listener in Japan.
Yes, that was the one that I enjoyed the most. I'd love to know where in Japan. It doesn't give us the city, but if you're listening right now, the person who's in Japan,
give us a call.
Yeah, it could be my sister. She's moving out there to Japan for she's going to go visit, but I don't think she's there yet, so it's not her yet. But
even beyond that too, beyond just the podcast, if you have comments or suggestions or topics that you would like to hear addressed by Father Anderson and myself, to shoot us an email at apriestandarabi@gmail.com.
Yes, or leave a comment on actual iTunes where you can do that. So rank it. We hope that you would give it 5 stars, and then leave a comment there and about what you want to hear. Because listen, the Rabbi and I get together each week. We try to stay a bit relevant. We try to look at what's going on in the world today, and we try to see what would be kind of a fun, hot topic that sometimes it gets a little deep. A lot of times we like to keep it lighthearted. But let us know big questions you've had about either Judaism or Christianity, about looking through the faith lens with big topics. We've taken on, we don't skirt away from it. We've taken on sex. We've taken on, we'll be taking on human trafficking soon, which is now a hot topic here, unfortunately, in Martin County. It's very sad. But today we were going back to the basics of how does a rabbi and a priest get together and talk about some things of faith and show our two different perspectives on things. That's what we do a lot here. And it's okay for us to disagree. So today,
but we still never let's go back again. Let's go back to that original episode 1. Mm-hmm. Right. And for our listeners, I'm sure you're all aware right? You charged me with the responsibility of adding a celebrity quote, as I'm a very big fan of Beverly Hills 90210, and I did that. I took this amazing and beautiful moment between I think it was Brandon and Kelly.
Yes.
And morph that into some form of our prayer service. I think it was in a sermon that I gave, or possibly a benediction at the end. And then we charged you, Father Anderson,
Yes.
with the Alyssa Milano.
Uh-huh.
Where are we with that?
I came through, man.
Okay.
I came through. Actually, you know what I did is that I quoted her in a tweet about her take on divine spirituality, because I'm not sure if she's, it seems like she's more like the whole spiritual thing is definitely there. I'm not sure if she puts it in some form of denomination or religion. But what I did do is that I went a step further and I quoted and had the congregation respond to me. We did a call and response of Backstreet Boys. So I don't care who you are, where you've been, what you've done, as long as you love me.
Was it like a flash mob? Did suddenly you all break out into song?
No, I wish it would have happened. A lot of people were too embarrassed to admit that they knew the lyrics, and I'm staring them in the face saying, I know you're in my generation. You know these lyrics. Don't try to tell me you don't know this band, this boy band. I didn't expect the kids to know. So I got a boy band in there, and it pertained to the gospel. It wasn't just a shtick. It meant, this idea of, I don't care who you are, what you've done, where you've been, as long as you love me. Fit that into the gospel of Jesus, that, Jesus is here for you no matter where you've been, and love me, I love you. And we can transform your heart, buddy, with Backstreet Boys. So
we can put that to rest now. We can put that.
I think so. I think so. Like, 13, 14 episodes in, we can put that to rest. So one thing we can't put to rest, because it's always going to be there for us to chew on, is what we call sometimes in the Episcopal denomination, the Decalogue. I don't know if you all refer to it as the Decalogue, but is the 10 Commandments. And so today we want to take on this cornerstone.
I mean, we created it.
Yeah, you guys were
Yes.
You. Well, God created it.
God created, but with the help of Moses.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, was it? I mean, this is where it all starts. Was it really with the help of Moses?
So, it's such an interesting concept, right? Because we have in the Torah the notion that, God communes with Moses for 40 days and 40 nights, right? Moses comes down. The people are anxious and they veer in some way, as every generation does, as we read in the Torah, we read in the Bible. And as Moses comes down from Mount Sinai after communing with God and has these 10 commandments, sees the people worshiping this golden calf, fashioned by Aaron, Moses' brother, who later subsequently becomes the high priest. Moses, out of rage and slight embarrassment, takes those commandments and smashes them, pulverizes them on the base of the mountain. But it's an interesting notion because our text makes it clear that with those 10 commandments, that Moses himself turns his back to the people and shatters those commandments. Now, the question we have is, what was on them?
That's what we all want to know. What was on those tablets? And have we ever had, because Jews are much better at this, has there been any kind of just wonder and what's the word I'm looking for? My gosh, where you have not a you know what I'm saying? You're just staring at me, watching me just wallow in this horrible quicksand of unknowingness right now as a Christian.
It's okay.
When you all riff on the text, you know what I'm talking about?
No,
a midrash. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, a midrash. Has there ever been a midrash on that of what might have been on those other tablets?
I'm sure. I think that the general Jewish conception is that really we don't know.
Of course,
and really we don't know.
I'm glad we agree on that part.
The interfaith agreement. Yes. But it's interesting because scholars have always put forward that were those first set of commandments, was there any human involvement whatsoever? And I think that at least my understanding has always been that there was not, that it was completely and utterly defined by, written by, and dictated by God. And when Moses then goes back up to speak with God, there tends to be that notion that God and Moses, divine and human intervention, collaboratively speak together to fashion what we then have as the Ten
But
Commandments.
why? Where do we get that though? That idea that you're trying to say that he would have co-authored, that if you looked at the Ten Commandments, it says co-authored by Yahweh and Senor Moses.
Well, I think part of the understanding is, now I'm in the hot seat. I think the understanding for us is that because Moses then goes back up again and communes with God and comes down again to present these 10 commandments, means that there must have been, or should have been, this divine and human collaborative effort. Because if you look at the 10 commandments themselves, the first 3 are very, very, and ultimately God-centered. Right. So the first one, which goes into, a Judaic perspective of, the 13 attributes of faith, the 13 articles of faith defined by Maimonides, says that I am the Lord your God. Okay. I mean, it's monotheism. It's the central core of Western religious ideology and Western belief. The second is you shall have no other gods but me. And then the third is you shall not take the Lord's name in vain. And I want to, if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is kind of, chunk these into sections in some way to be able to start really unpacking and interpreting what that means. Why the need to state it twice? I am the Lord your God. Are we saying now we need to be a little bit more specific with it, for there is only one God? But doesn't that imply I am the Lord your God? There's one God in our tradition, in Western religious ideology,
Judeo-Christian ideology. No, Abrahamic faith.
Absolutely.
And Muslims the same thing. But wait, you're still not getting. I think you kind of took a little jog away from the original question. So let me put you back in the hot seat. How and why do we think though that there was a co-writing on this, co-author, that it wasn't just Moses was up there and God gave him the law, and then Moses brought it down? So Moses is more this intermediary, because from a Christian perspective, when Jesus does the Sermon on the Mount, a lot of times we believe that is Jesus up there, because the Gospel of Matthew was really the audience for the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew is speaking more to a Jewish audience and trying to say that, hey, this guy Moses, Jesus is the new Moses. He is the fulfillment of the law. Here he is again up in a mountain up there and speaking and preaching and teaching this new edict, this new way. You've heard it this way. Now I say it this way. And so Moses is he this intermediary? Because if he's co-authoring, man, that makes him a little divinish.
So that's interesting. Would it change our understanding if those 10 commandments had nothing to do with humanity, but only God? So if God wrote those 10 commandments,
yeah,
and there were 10 very specific laws that God bestowed upon human beings, would that change from our understanding today of what the 10 commandments are? I don't know if I'm being clear. Let me twist it to your end. What's the Christian understanding of the 10 commandments, which I would only safely assume it's the same as a Judaic understanding?
It's a Judaic understanding, but that idea that there's been a co-authorship of the two, that's I would say from an Episcopal understanding, or let me just say from a Father Christian understanding, that has not been the theology that I've heard world practice. That would be more that the Lord gave these laws to Moses, and Moses gave these to the people. And so therefore, this is all strictly from God. God saying, I'm going to give you laws that are about how you treat me and how you love me. And then the other half are going to be about how you treat one another. And it's all about relationship. It's all about being a relational, being in a relationship with God and being in a relationship with one another. That is the key. So then when Jesus comes to fulfill the law, Jesus says it gets back to the two things, of course. So love the Lord with your whole heart, mind, and soul. Mm-hmm. That'll take a lifetime to do. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Everything, all other laws fall underneath that. So this is the cornerstone of it. So if Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, and then we believe that if we believed that man co-authored, or Moses co-authored the 10 commandments, then the man had a stake in
co-authoring. Humanity had a stake.
Jesus,
yeah,
too.
But I think, and again, you're going to see so many different gray zones and certain interpretive understanding when it comes to the Ten Commandments. Whether you ask one Jew, you're going to get 10 Jews, you get literally 1,000 different opinions. My opinion has always been that in order for Moses to go back up and to speak with God, because God makes it very clear with those first set where he says, "Go down to those people, go down to your people, for I am enraged."
Right.
God sees what the people are doing, right? They're dancing, they're praying, they're worshiping this golden calf, which is totally opposite to what the intent had been. And I think when God and Moses then go back up, I don't know. I've always felt that there had to have been human involvement in order for those 10 commandments, because ultimately there's buy-in.
Yeah, but okay, I'm sure there's buy-in, but this can be buy-in because God's telling you. And Exodus 21 through 17, and God spoke all these words.
Mm-hmm.
So God spoke them all. So you would be sort of insinuating that before, that maybe in chapter 19, that in Exodus 19, that there was some kind of collaboration that was happening when they're on top of Mount Sinai.
But remember, God spoke.
He spoke all of them.
Yes, God spoke.
But
who chiseled them into?
Well, this brings up the whole thing about the Bible itself. And this brings up the whole thing, the difference between literalism and fundamentalism
Sure.
and contextualism, is that you have the Word of God and the Spirit of God comes to humankind. Humankind is this middle person who has to write it down, the different editors, and what happens there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there is a human touch, which some Christian leaders would not agree with me on that, that the Holy Spirit is working through all of these writers, and it's exactly, but there's part of Christianity, part of Christendom, they would say, well, we have to be honest here. There is a human print on Holy Scripture because it came through. God decided and chose to allow man to write it. It's different than it was in Mormonism, where I'm not a Mormon expert, but he literally digs up the tablets that have already been made.
But it's interesting given that interpretive understanding, right? So as if I was a very Orthodox or traditional Jew, the understanding of the Bible is that was written, dictated, everything was the word of God. As a Reformed Jew, I say, and I believe that the Torah itself, the Bible, or in this case, the Torah, was divinely inspired by God, but written by human beings, right? Because we know that there may be some scribal mistakes, there may be some inaccuracies, there may be some challenges with the text itself, but the message is very clear. And I think with the Ten Commandments, the message is fairly concrete, right? I got the first 3 commandments that are about God, right? I am the Lord your God. And with that one statement, with that first commandment, there's so much that's wrapped in those, I am the Lord your God, in those 5 words. They're so much, and as a Jew, we hear those words and we think about, I am the Lord your God. We think about freedom. We think about slavery. We think about all these things that happen throughout the Jewish understanding, because, the phrase that occurs so often in our Torah too is the notion that says, I am the Lord your God, for I brought you out of the land of Egypt, right? So it's about oppression. It's about it's about redemption. It's about freedom. It's about, not giving anyone the ability to be a slave. It's remember the oppressed people, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And I think that there's so much there. We go to the second one. You shall have no other gods but me. And if you think about it, given the context of which, these were
another translation is also, you shall not make for yourself any idol.
Yes. Okay. So, whether we use that translation, or we use, you shall not have any other gods but me, or before me, you shall not make any image or any idol, where does that come from? I think that's also based on the experience, right? Why you shall have no other gods before me, or any molten image.
Well, in 2019, when you wake up in the morning, and I've heard this from a parishioner, it's a great line. Every morning he wakes up, he asks himself, what God am I going to worship today? And that's just with a small G, right? Or am I going to worship the God? Am I going to worship the God of strength, of love, of compassion, of hope? Because you wake up in the morning and you might have different things flying around inside of your head. And do you want to worship the God of anxiety? Do you want to worship the God of fear with a small g, right? These are the idols. These are the idols in our lives right now. These are the idols that we can place, that we can worship, and we can fall down and give a whole bunch of headspace to these idols in our head. And I think the monotheistic religion is not just, sometimes I think in the 21st century, or even myself, I would think about like, well, it's different for us. It's like we don't have the Feast of Dionysus hanging around here. We don't have to worry about some Zoroastrian other gods or some other gods that are competing with us. No, we have smaller case G gods all the time, competing for our hearts and our attention and our love. And the 10 Commandments come in, especially with that first one, is that which God do you want to worship? Do you want to give your life to? Do you want to submit to? Do you want to give your heart and your life and your soul over to a God of lust?
But is it not saying that at the end of the day, whether it be a God of vengeance or a God of love, the God of compassion, the God of mercy, isn't it also saying from a Judeo-Christian perspective, it's all of it? It's all of it. We submit to all of it, not just one. I mean, I'll be the first. I'm not one who wakes up in the morning and what I should, and I try as best I can to do, is to wake up in the morning and we have a prayer that we say. It says "Modeh ani lefanecha," right? Which is a prayer that we say of thank you, God, for the ability to wake up. Thank you, God, for my faculties. Thank you, God, for the gift of life that you've given me. And I'm not great at it. I'm really not. And I really try. I really do. When my oldest was born, we had a wonderful, great friend of ours who bought us this beautiful wall hanging that had that prayer on it, and we have it hanging in our daughter's room. And every now and then, it makes me more aware, that life is so tenuous that it shouldn't be taken for granted. But how often do we take it for granted? And I think something simple. I mean, even when I was in rabbinical school, we were always taught and told, and I'm sure,
seminary
with you in seminary, we call it the same. It's seminary.
Okay.
If you're going to pray spiritually, when you pray at the exact same time every single day. So if it's at night, pray at the same time before night. And I've been doing that practice for 20, 25 years.
The exact same time.
Just before bed.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, I don't kneel because as Jews we don't kneel.
Okay.
I don't.
Why don't you kneel?
Fold my because we only kneel before God.
But you're praying.
I am praying, but it's taken in a context.
You could.
Right.
You'd be fulfilling.
Yes, but I think for me, it's a way of centering myself. So as I lie in bed, and I'm one of these people that say, if I say it in my head, it's not real. Right. So I'll have to say it out loud, or I'll go, and if my wife's next to me, I'll kind of mutter it. I don't want her hearing
your prayer,
my prayers.
You guys don't pray together.
No. But I pray for generally the same type of thing every single day. I pray for peace. I pray for the gift of my family. I pray for the life that's been instilled in me. I thank God for the breath that I exhibit day in and day out. And I pray for those that for those that call upon God for health or for healing or for meaning or in search of something that may their desires be fulfilled.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So let's just get back to so we've talked about you shall have no other gods but me. You shall not make for yourself any idol. The third one, you shall not invoke with malice the name of the Lord your God. Right. So that one right then and there, we were at a youth camp recently, and we've gone out to these big mission trip youth camps where we're out in the mountains somewhere. And last time we did this, we were out, I believe, in New Mexico. And so the head of the lead speaker who's leading us in worship every single day was asking all the kids there, when's the last time you used GD this or GD that, right? Or you just say, oh God, right? Oh Jesus. You're using the Lord's name in vain. To be aware of that. You might not think it means anything, but this is again, goes back to the first commandment. Mm-hmm. Are you loving the Lord with your whole heart, mind, and soul? Are you, there are no other gods there. And if it is, the one and true God, then there needs to be this preciousness and that you have a reverence for who God is in your life. And it's tough because from a secular standpoint or a cultural standpoint, when you say, oh, Jesus, you're not really meaning, oh, Jesus, oh, God, like you're not really throwing darts at God. But it's the reverence of that name, right, that gets taken down. And maybe that might, for you to take time to think about that, could help remove one less rock that's standing in your way from intimacy with God. Because the way that you treat his name, because you wouldn't say that about your wife, right? I wouldn't sit here when I'm upset just out of nowhere, just go, oh, Anastasia, right? I wouldn't do that. Stub my toe. Oh, Anastasia, right? Drop
what
something.
Is worse? What is just out of curiosity in terms of vanity and thou shall not take the Lord's name in vain. From a very Christian perspective, is it worse to say, oh God, or Jesus?
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
So, we went back, last week we had talked about, strange and comical, quirky things the rabbi's daughter says. And, not that this happens often, but every now and then my daughter will blurt out, oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh,
and I go, whoa, that,
ouch.
Please don't do that. And she goes, well, why? I've heard it. She didn't think about it. She didn't invent it. But she hears it in the playground, or she hears it elsewhere. And I said, she goes, well, Dad, because as Jews, we don't really, think about Jesus. What's the harm? And I go, the harm is that other people do.
Right.
And we need to be respectful. And that's, as a parent, that's what I want most for my kids is I want them to be respectful of other people's traditions and other people's beliefs.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting because how often do we hear those words, Jesus, or oh, Christ, or oh, God, and that notion of, have I now taken God's name in vain? And even if I haven't, please, God, get me through the rest of the day. Am I taking God's name in vain that way? Or am I asking God for strength to get me through whatever challenging moment I may be having?
Yes.
But where's the gray zone?
Well, I don't think there is a gray zone. One is you're calling upon the Lord's name for strength, for compassion, for hope, for strength, for whatever you need. The other one, you're doing it because out of being flustered by the anger that you're sort of focalizing, is that a word? You're centralizing, you're pushing all of your frustration and anger upon this war that becomes meaningless, and you're not really kind of throwing darts again at God, but you're not using it you're not calling for God to really come and be your savior, your comfort, your protection.
So, but what if I said, oh, dear God, get me through this day. And if you get me through this day, I promise that I will commit to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. I mean, you're not using the Lord's name in vain. I mean, you're deal making, which is always a slippery slope with God, right? Because you got to always unfold to his will. But it's always, you could play the deal making game with God and see what happens. If you give me this parking space, I'll actually, do whatever for you, God. But no, I mean,
it's such an interpretive commandment.
I don't think so. It's straight up. It's straight up. Every example you just gave me just showed me that is one of them is using it almost as a throwaway term of how to throw your anger, your expression, your frustration on. And the other one is actually, dear God.
So
please help me.
The interpretive
part, strong. It is a relationship. Yes. Again, you wouldn't use your wife's name and you wouldn't use her name in vain. You wouldn't. Have you ever done that?
I get it. But if we were to say, oh God, what a really trying day. Now I get it in the semblance of understanding. I'm invoking God in an experience that I am going through, to which I'm asking God for some
inclusion.
Okay.
Yeah. You're including him into this. That's all that God wants is relationship, right? All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come on back because there's other commandments that have to deal with also, obviously, relationship with other people, not just with God, but also why are these commandments here? What do they mean today? And also, what were the other 10? If we were going to make up another commandment, if we could write another commandment, what would it be? And can you question these commandments in the 21st century? Is there any kind of gray area here? And then when you throw Jesus in the middle of this, Jesus starts to have his commentary on some of these commandments where he takes this step further. So all that's coming up in when we get back from break. All right. Bye-bye. I know your heads are bopping in your car right now as you're listening to that rock and jamming music. Yeah, that was recorded by the rabbi and the priest inside of a studio, just jamming away on our on being influenced by 80s music, which we all love and adore. Hey, so today we are talking about the 10 Commandments. We're having fun with it, where we're kind of like ripping and tearing, where we're having some fun here, playing with them and seeing what is what pertains to us in the 21st century, what is locked in, is there gray areas here. But let's just talk about all 10 right here. And I'm going to do, I think where I'm coming from here is the Exodus version here. Lord help me if maybe this is the Deuteronomic version.
Was that taking the Lord's name in vain?
I know. God help me. God help me if I'm wrong here, because if I'm about to speak your law and I'm quoting the wrong scripture here and misleading our thousands of listeners right now, then Lord help me. So,
I'm just teasing you.
But inshallah, this is the one this is the right one. So here we go. So here are the commandments of God to His people. So I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of bondage. You shall have no other gods but me. Okay. You shall not make for yourself any idol. Number 2, numero 3, you shall not invoke with malice the name of the Lord your God. All right, think about all these. Numero 4, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 5, honor your father and your mother. That's a good one we want to get into, because what if your father and mother are just, they ain't good. They ain't good people. You shall not commit murder. When I was a kid, I always thought like, well, that was obvious. But then Jesus says, well, he takes it a step further and starts talking about anger with that.
But it's an interesting notion as well. Just the terminology. Lo tirtzach says you shall not murder, and not that I'm the world's leading authority on the King James version, but right. I believe the King James version says thou shalt not kill. Okay, and I think that there, we'll get to that. I think that there's a
difference between murder and killing,
between murdering and
absolutely,
killing.
And that's come up before. So yeah, you shall not commit adultery, right? You shall not steal. You shall not be a false witness. And finally, you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. So these all 10, and thank God, I mean, from a Christian perspective, we have grace, because Jesus goes to a place where he says, you have heard these laws, but he says, if you, even with adultery, he says, you've heard, don't commit adultery. I say, don't even have bad thoughts about your neighbor's wife. And if you do, tear your eye out. Or you hear do not steal. Well, if you're going to steal, well, then chop off your hand. I think Jesus is not really speaking literally. If not, we'd all be walking around, without hands and eyes. But I think he's trying to get to the seeds that are underneath that could lead to murder, that could lead to lust. You start playing around with, in the 21st century, they talk about this. I think I was reading oh gosh, the great author on marriages. It starts with a G. This is terrible. Anyways, Gottfried. Oh my gosh,
Gilbert Gottfried.
No, not Gilbert Gottfried. But he's talking about the porn, right? That porn, when you start to mess around with porn can be easily a gateway drug. Not only is it now starting to define your own sexual interest away from your spouse, but then you start to get excited about porn, and then you start to do the little chat rooms, and then the chat rooms can start to lead to can lead to making you make a phone call. Next thing you know, you're in an adulterous relationship. Jesus is saying, go all the way back to the beginning. You just being in porn, you're already in an adulterous relationship because you're planting the seeds inside of your heart.
But that's the whole notion of what coveting means, right? From our understanding, coveting is, the thought process or the thinking of it, because the thinking could lead potentially towards temptation, which then leads to action.
Right.
And each one of the later commandments, the latter commandments, feed into one another, right? If I steal, what am I really doing? First, I've coveted my neighbor's property or something that my neighbor has. I've gone through beyond just the thinking, desiring, and wanting. Now I've gone through temptation. Well, would it be so bad? Suddenly, I've gone through the act itself. I've taken, so now I've stolen from my neighbor. And I've committed not just I've broken one commandment, I've broken 2.
Right. And the other part of this too, like these last, let me see here. We got covet, false witness, steal, adultery, murder, 6 father and mother. Okay, so we got 6 of them that's just based on relationship stuff here. Let's cut back to honor your father and mother. So we'll leave that one out. These last 5: murder, adultery, steal, bear false witness, and covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. A lot of that also has to do with something you and I got to one point, which was, do you first have to accept God's love, or do you first have to love yourself? You say first got to love yourself to be able to accept God's love. I say you got to be able to accept God's love to be able to understand what it's like to love yourself. But no matter what, there is a love of yourself and a love of God to appreciate and to accept God's undeniable love for yourself. And when you do not, when you struggle to feel that you're full and complete, made in God's image from Genesis 1:26, that I'm an Episcopalian, not a Baptist, so sometimes I'm off of my scripture. That when you do that, you might start coveting your neighbor's wife because you're not fully finding full validation in your own self and your own marriage for whatever reason. There's some self-deprecation and some hatred of yourself. That what God has blessed you with, that you would start looking now at your neighbor's wife or looking at your neighbor's boat and being like, gosh darn, I need to catch up with, see, I didn't use the name of Maine. I said, gosh darn, I need to catch up with the Joneses.
But the intent, just to go back on that vanity there, the intent when we say, oh my gosh, oh my goodness, we're placating it. I mean, in some point,
do you know where heck is?
What do you mean?
Heck is where you go when you don't believe in gosh. Okay. That's a good Mormon joke. I used to work with the Mormons out in Utah when I worked at the Shakespeare Festival out there. So I think some of this does these last 5. It's all about relationship and about being.
But to go back on that one about thou shalt honor thy mother and father.
But this is where it gets tricky,
right? Is it about honor or is it about respect?
Well, or are they? You know the Hebrew better than me, so you tell me.
But it's actually about both. It says kaved, which means heavy. And it means to honor. So there's something there about honoring one's mother and father. Respect, I think, is earned, right? To honor, the honor of one's mother and father is very different than respecting one's mother and father. Okay, I may do something, my parents may tell me something or bring me up in a certain way of understanding. But if I don't agree or I'm challenged by something, if I go against what they're saying, have I dishonored my mother and father? Have I disrespected them? Or in some way, is it about autonomy and, the way that we live our own lives individually?
Well, you heard a great story. Who was it? Were you with me when we just heard this great story the other day about a father who told his son to come out into the field with him and to go and plow. And I think I heard this actually in Interfaith service. It was at this Black History Month, and he told his father said, "Now you got to get out in here in the field, and you got to come and do the work." And the son said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "What do you mean you're not?" He said, "Dad, I want more out of this life. I want more out of this life, and I want to do something different. I have a different calling." He's like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "I have a different calling," and he stood up for himself. And then the dad first wanted to smack him across the face because he wasn't, to his point, wasn't honoring him. But he realized that his son is growing into his own manhood. And he said, "Well, what do you want to do instead?" He goes, "I want to go to the library and I want to study. I want to go read these great books." And he said, "God bless you, son. Go do that." And so in a way, he was, would you say he was honoring his dad and honoring him that did he dishonor his father there? I think at the end, his dad felt was like, wow, I want my son to be better than I am.
But that's also an open and honest conversation between father and son, right? What about the instance where, let's say somebody is a hunter and makes their subsistence on hunting animals for food? Maybe they take it and, they're a food processing plant and they've been doing that for decades and it's been in the family business. And a child says, "I don't want that. I don't believe in killing animals for that purpose. It goes against my belief or what I firmly understand." And the father says, "But it's been in our family tradition for, hundreds of years. This is what we do. You're rejecting what we gave you." Is that about dishonoring? But I think the example you gave is that when there is an open and honest conversation that allows somebody else to see someone else's perspective, I think it is about honor.
Okay. So, but let's get a little trickier here. Let's just say you came from a home where mom and dad weren't great moms and dads. And And so let's say it was not just a broken home. It could have been dad was just a real jerk and mom was not present at all. And for whatever reason, everyone's got their own battles that are going on. But for whatever reason, the child did not feel respect or love and actually has so much animosity towards their parents. Do you think that God is obviously is omniscient, omnipresent, knows everything, that a therapist, if you go into therapy, a therapist is going to want to get you to a place where you forgive your parents and see them as your mother and father, and maybe get you to a place where maybe you do honor them. Maybe you don't respect them, but you honor them because they brought you into this world. And then you come to a place you realize they did the best they could, which was pretty bad, but that's all they knew how to do because they were just really broken people. Mm-hmm. And is that where that you must honor your father and mother, even if they're completely terrible people? I mean, let's go really bad. I mean, let's just say they were abusive or whatever. Do you still, how does a person in your congregation, when they read that, knowing that might bring them to tears, to say, how do I honor these parents who abandoned me? Let's just say, is God asking, is he being this ultra high therapist, knowing that the pathway of forgiveness will actually heal you as the child, knowing that you can let go of this pain that they had for you? I mean, for Joseph, he's dealing with his brothers, not with his parents, but he gets abandoned by his brothers. If he stayed in a victim state and didn't forgive them in his own heart and didn't have some kind of love somewhere, he wouldn't have gone on to be so successful. He would have just been this horrible victim.
But that's interesting, because with reconciliation, whether we look at it from, and I think Joseph is a great example, because ultimately at the end, Joseph, largely says to his brothers, I harbor no ill feeling.
Yeah.
Look at me. I'm the second most important person in Egypt.
Yeah.
Without you, I don't know where my life would be.
Yeah.
And I think he's had a long, long time to reflect and a long time to ponder what was going on. But I think that raises a really big issue. I mean, how do we reconcile with ourselves, to which we were raised or we were born into, of saying, maybe it wasn't the most healthy of upbringing when I was a child, and am I able to forgive? And maybe I'm not able to forgive. And maybe that's where, the therapist comes in to be able to work with those inner feelings, to be able to say, I'm not asking you to, fully respect your parents, but is there a way of getting to a point where you're able to see in some way, the challenges or the difficulties through family life?
I think that happens when you get older, when you start to grow into being a man or a woman, and you can start to now see your parents less as failed Superman and Superwoman, and start to see them as human beings who made horrible mistakes, maybe. And then you can that pathway to forgiveness, so you can get to a place as a child and say, okay, I can honor them in some way as being the people who brought me into this world, but maybe I don't respect, or I have major issues with what they did to me, and I don't have to have a thick relationship with them and go and sing Kumbaya. Mm-hmm. But for my own health, to get to a place of forgiveness. And maybe that's what God is all about here by saying, honor your father and mother. Because I'm sure there was pretty dysfunctional parents back then as well. Even though that, obviously parenting has changed. So what else we got here? I
want to go back to just the fourth commandment, if that's okay.
Okay. So thou shalt not drive a Toyota.
Yeah. I think you're out of luck there.
Oh yeah. I'm a Toyota kind of guy. So I got to.
But the commandment that says you shall remember and you shall keep the Sabbath day.
Boom. That's probably one of the most broken ones by some of the most devoted followers of the Judeo-Christian
And I think
faith.
It's interesting to note as well, as Jews, when we usher in and we bring in Shabbat, we have two candles that we light, right? And it's not by accident. The two candles, one is to remember the Sabbath day. The second is to keep the Sabbath day. Shamor et Yom HaShabbat and Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. And I think that there's something really actually amazing about that commandment. And again, that it's interpretive in the understanding of how we observe that commandment, right? My observance of Shabbat will be very different than somebody that is more traditional, or even somebody of my own movement. My observance of Shabbat may be very different than someone else who's a Reform Jew, than their observance. And I remember years ago, when I was in rabbinical school, I had a very challenging conversation with my rabbinic mentor, and my rabbinic mentor had said, "When is what do you do on Shabbat? What makes something?" And there's a difference between being special and making Shabbat holy, right? And we are to make Shabbat holy. And I said, well, as a student, we go to school Monday through Thursday. Friday we have off, largely in preparation for whatever we might be doing that weekend. If we're leading services Friday night or Saturday or Sunday, religious school on Sunday. And I had said, well, my Shabbat is Friday. And my rabbinic mentor, horrified, said, no. And we engaged in a conversation. And I said, look, Friday is, it's a peaceful time. I don't have to get up at 6 a.m. I can sleep in a little bit. For me, that's my day of rest. Because Saturday, I worked in the very far west end of London, and it would take me an hour and a half to get to religious school. We had religious school on Saturdays. Religious school started at 8:30. So I would leave around 6. I'd get there around 7:30, prepare, get everything ready. And 8 o'clock until 11:30, we would have religious school. And I said, well, I'm already there. I'm leading.
You're doing a lot of work.
I'm doing work. And, when we're done, then I lead the congregation.
If you were married at that time, you'd be away from your family.
Yes. Right. But the interesting thing was, I had said, I'm already working.
Yes.
And then I'm leading a congregation through prayer. So
That's
by the time
work.
I'm done at 2 o'clock, why not go back up to my home and prepare text and study and everything else for the week ahead? And she said, that's your mistake. Because, in that semblance, it's not work. Because what you're doing is you're empowering a congregation. You're educating children. I said, I get that. She said, but when you go back to your home and you're preparing for the rest of the week, you can do that on Sunday. You can do that later. You can do that Saturday night. You don't need to do it on Shabbat.
Okay, so for the mom that's home with her kids on Shabbat, all that homework that she's got to do, let's say for whatever reason, let's say she's a single mom, and so she's got to do all this work with the kids. She got to get them ready, got to shower, and that takes a tremendous amount of work, right? But that wouldn't be going against the Sabbath because that's love of family, caring for the family that needs to be done. But if she starts to now slip in, maybe she has a part-time job where she can work from home and starts trying to send some emails, or if she starts doing any other kind of work like mowing the lawn or something like that.
But it's interesting because we have to also define what is work.
Right.
And from a very traditional perspective, the act of work is the act of creating. So to create something on Shabbat is forbidden. Now, as a Reformed Jew, what I understand, and
can I go back to creation? Because
Yes.
Does that mean that you can't procreate?
So actually,
I'm talking about a married man and woman.
One of the they actually say if you engage in sex on Shabbat, not only is it a commandment or a mitzvah, right? If you happen to engage in sex on Shabbat, it's actually known as a double mitzvah. It's great because of whatever.
But you are creating.
Yes. 40 weeks later.
Sure, but you're starting the process.
Yes. But, the act of work, for example, so somebody very traditional would not, turn on a TV, for example, on Shabbat, right? We wouldn't turn on another.
What are you creating with the TV?
So technically,
distraction.
You're creating and I'm sure anyone who's an engineer would argue with me on this, but you're creating a spark, right? A spark that creates electricity, or it's the creative act in and of itself. I can't, if I was a very traditional Orthodox Jew, my kids wouldn't be able to draw pictures on Shabbat. You're creating something.
Okay, but what this is where I think where Reformed Judaism comes in, and this is where, from a Christian, where Jesus comes in, where he starts breaking Sabbath and doing certain things on Sabbath. That is Sabbath made for man or man made for Sabbath. What is the whole point of Sabbath?
So
right? And if we look rest,
it is about rest, and I think if we look at it from that understanding, it's about how I define Shabbat, and I define it to my community, is Shabbat is the ability to do the things that you cannot do during the week that you can only do on Shabbat, with the understanding, because that just renders something special, doesn't render it holy, with the recognition that today is God's day of rest as well as my own. I'm invoking God in my day, which then makes that day holy.
Yeah, but you and I are both clergy members, and there is no way I view Sunday as my Sabbath. My Sabbath day is Monday, and I turn off my phone. I try to turn off my phone. I don't respond to emails because I am working, and it's glorious. I'm worshiping the Lord, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of preparation that goes into it, it's all glorious. So I can understand that that's beautiful. But if God is saying, "I made you, I know who you are," and in order for you to be at your tip-top shape for the other 6 days, you need a seventh day to just chill out,
yes, and
dude.
Just rest. Absolutely.
Just chill out, my dude. And on Sunday, you're doing 3 to 4 sermons and maybe also doing a confirmation class in the evening. You're going to be like poo on Monday. You
Yes.
know what I mean? You're like, I
But you know, it's interesting. It's interesting because on a Shabbat level.
would you agree though?
Oh, absolutely.
But so you take a separate day. Would you call Monday your Sabbath, or
No.
would you just call it a day of rest?
I would just say it's my day off.
It's like 2-day weekend.
Yes, I get a 1-day weekend. I get Mondays off, but even Saturday. By the time I go home, and it may be 1 or 2 o'clock, usually around 2, and I've been working since 8 o'clock. There's something about the rest of that day of the recognition of really spending real time with my family, and doing things that I can't do.
You're not fixing the pipes in the bathroom. You're not doing laundry. You're not catching up on bills.
No, because I'm also the least handy person on the planet.
Okay.
But what this has shown is that there certainly is a lot more of these commandments to follow,
to play around
and
with,
things that we can certainly talk about. But I think as we conclude,
yes,
just a couple things that are quite noteworthy that at least from our perspective we'd like to tell a lot of our listeners. On March 12th, which happens to be a Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, Temple Beit Hayam at the Rappaport Center at Temple Beit Hayam, we'll be bringing in Robert Putnam, an American. He is a professor at Harvard University, talking about the crumbling American dream and how to fix it. He is well known. He's a writer. He bridges topics between education and religion. So if you are interested and available, that is Tuesday evening, March 12th, 7 o'clock at Temple Beit Hayam. Tickets can be purchased. They are $35, and they can be purchased on our Temple website of www.tbhfl.org.
All right, I got 2 things for you. On March 6th is our Ash Wednesday services. So we are starting in the morning at 7:30. Then we got one at 12:10. Then we actually have one at 5:15. That's with our community meal that we serve. That's in the Pittenger Center. And then in the evening at 7. So if you want to get ashes, come on over. And if you're from a different faith or religion, just come and experience it. We'd love to have you there over at the church. And then also the NAACP is having their banquet. That's going to be on March 9th. And would you believe it? I'm actually receiving an award. They're going to give an award to a clown like me. So if you want to give them a call, if you want to get a ticket there, because it is their biggest fundraiser. I think it's like $75. Also, shameless plug. I started my own YouTube channel, Your Favorite Christian, on YouTube. Go subscribe, get your notifications, leave comments. The last thing I took on was human trafficking and sex trafficking, because that is a hot topic right here in Martin County, and we're hoping to bring on an expert this next Friday to talk about how that's kind of been something that's really shocked our community here. But it's let's not be silly here. It's a global epidemic. So,
and if we could just end with the 11th commandment, which is what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. I think that there is a lot of strength and healing that our world needs, which is to bring back kindness and to bring back humanity in some way.
Bring it back, baby. Bring back that kindness. Love on your neighbor, as Jesus says. Also, love on your enemy. So, all right. God bless you. We will see you next Friday. Peace. Whenever you're ready. All right. Senor Rabbi.
Father and